Let me ask you something. Have you ever said something out of frustration only to regret it 5 seconds later? Or maybe you've shared a dream or a goal with the wrong person and their reaction crushed your momentum? Yeah, we've all done it. But here's the truth. If you want to grow, really grow, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, you've got to learn to grow in silence. And more importantly, you've got to learn to control what comes out of your mouth. Let me break it down. We're taught from a young age to speak up, to be heard, to voice our opinions. And while communication is important, there's a critical lesson that often gets left out. Silence isn't weakness, it's strength. In fact, silence might be the most underrated form of power there is. We live in a world that values noise. Social media platforms reward the loudest voices, the constant sharers, the attention grabbers. But the truth? The people who are really making moves, the ones who are truly growing, they're often doing it in silence, quietly, deliberately, without the need for constant validation. Because real growth doesn't need to announce itself. There's a reason why some of the most successful individuals you know aren't broadcasting their every move. They're not spilling their goals on every call or posting every step of the process. They understand that progress loves privacy. Silence creates space for focus. It creates an environment where you can actually hear yourself think, where you can separate your voice from the noise of the world around you. Let me tell you something. Not everything needs to be shared. Not every win needs to be posted. Not every idea needs to be spoken out loud. When you learn to hold things close, your plans, your dreams, even your struggles, you start to understand the value of energy. Every time you speak, you're giving away a piece of it. And when you speak too soon, when you overshare, you risk diluting your drive. Because once you say something, you feel a little bit like you've already done it. That small dopamine hit of just announcing a goal can trick your brain into thinking you've already achieved something when really nothing has happened yet. Silence protects your process. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you focused. And here's what most people don't realize. Silence also gives you power in your relationships, in your career, in your everyday life, because when you don't rush to speak, when you don't react immediately, you have the upper hand. You're thinking while everyone else is talking. You're observing while everyone else is performing. You're staying calm when others are being controlled by their emotion. That's strength. It takes way more control to stay quiet than it does to blurt out the first thing that comes to your mind. You can fake confidence with loudness, but real confidence, that's in your ability to sit in silence and still feel secure. There's another layer to this. When you're silent, people don't know what you're thinking. And that unpredictability, that mystery, it's powerful because it makes people pause. It makes them pay attention. When you're always talking, people learn to tune you out. But when you're selective with your words, when you speak with intention, people lean in. They listen. Your words carry weight because they're not just filler. They mean something. Think about the strongest people you've met in your life, the ones you truly respect. Were they the loudest in the room, or were they the ones who knew when to speak and when not to? Power isn't in dominating the conversation. It's in mastering the moments of silence between the words. Growing in silence means understanding that your energy is precious, your focus is sacred, and you don't owe the world a play-by-play of your progress. You don't need permission to pursue your goals, and you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Let your results do the talking. Let your transformation speak for itself. There's also a level of emotional maturity that comes with silence. When someone says something triggering and you choose not to respond, that's growth. When someone doubts you and you don't waste time defending yourself, that's growth. When you're frustrated, angry, misunderstood, and instead of lashing out, you pause, that's not weakness. That's restraint. That's control. That's real power. Silence gives you time to reflect, and in that reflection, you learn. You learn what truly matters. You learn to separate what's urgent from what's important. You learn to identify your patterns, your triggers, your distractions. Growth doesn't happen when you're reacting all the time. Growth happens when you step back, process, and then move forward with clarity. And here's the hardest truth. The people who can't stop talking, they're usually the ones not doing the work. They're looking for recognition instead of results. They want the appearance of progress without the effort of actual growth. But if you're serious about becoming your best self, you can't afford to waste your energy on appearances. You've got to go quiet. You've got to lock in. You've got to learn to be okay with not being seen for a while, because the most powerful transformations happen in private, behind the scenes, in the dark. That's where resilience is built. That's where confidence is created. That's where character is shaped. So the next time you feel the urge to speak just to fill the silence, pause. Ask yourself, does this need to be said? Does this move me closer to who I want to become? Or is this just noise? Because when you start valuing silence, you start owning your power. You stop leaking energy into the world and you start directing it. You begin to move with purpose, with discipline, with strength. And that is when real growth begins. Your words are not just things you throw into the air. They are tools. They're programming your mind, your habits, and your outcomes. Every sentence you say, whether out loud or in your own head, becomes part of the story you believe. And here's the catch. Your brain listens. It listens carefully. It follows instructions, whether those instructions are intentional or reckless. That's why learning to control what you say isn't just about speaking politely or being politically correct. It's about shaping the very reality you live in. Most people don't even realize how powerful their words are. They speak on autopilot, narrating their insecurities, doubts, and frustrations like it's harmless venting. I'm always late. I'm so stupid. I could never do that. That's just how I am. They say these things casually, but what they're actually doing is reinforcing an identity, one they don't want, and one that's holding them back. Every time you say something, your subconscious locks it in. That becomes the framework for your decisions, your reactions, your habits. Think about it. If you constantly say, I'm bad with money, how likely are you to even try managing a budget or learning how to invest? Probably not very. Your brain takes that label and runs with it. It doesn't question whether it's true. It just starts living like it is. So you overspend. You avoid your bank statements. You tell yourself managing money isn't for you, and boom. Reality matches the story. Now flip that. Imagine if instead you trained yourself to say, I'm learning how to manage money better every day. Same situation, but totally different internal signal. That small change in words shifts your identity from helpless to empowered. And that's the whole point. Your words either build your future or reinforce your past. And let's be honest, most people speak from emotion, not intention. They react instead of respond. Something goes wrong and they immediately start complaining, blaming, gossiping, or spiraling into negative self-talk. But here's the truth you've got to absorb. What you speak about, you amplify. Complain about your problems constantly, and those problems get louder in your mind. Obsess out loud over your fears, and they start to own you. Speak negativity, and you start to believe that's all there is. This doesn't mean you lie to yourself or pretend everything is perfect. It means you speak like someone who's building something, not breaking it down. It means you stop declaring limitations and start declaring potential. You say, this is hard, but I'm figuring it out. You say, I've struggled with this, but I'm making progress. You speak in a way that fuels action, not excuse. This is especially important when you're talking about your goals. Too many people overshare. They talk about what they're going to do instead of just doing it. They post about their plans, tell everyone about their big ideas, and then feel like they've made progress just by announcing it. But here's what science tells us. When you talk about a goal before taking action, your brain gets a dopamine hit. You feel like you've accomplished something even though you haven't moved an inch. And that feeling kills your drive. So instead of talking, start doing. Speak less about your dreams and more about your discipline. Focus on reinforcing habits through language. Say things like, I show up for myself daily. I do hard things even when I don't feel like it. These phrases aren't fluff. They're mental reps. Every time you say them, you're building belief. And belief leads to action. That's the pattern. And it's not just about how you talk to yourself. It's how you talk to other people too. Your words influence how people see you, how they treat you, and what they expect from you. If you always talk like a victim, people will treat you like one. If you speak with conviction, even when you're uncertain, people start to trust you more. Your language sets the tone for your relationships, your leadership, your impact. There's also this quiet but powerful benefit to speaking with intention, clarity. When you're careful with your words, you start to notice what you really think. You notice the stories you've been carrying, the beliefs that don't serve you, the habits hidden in your language. And once you see them, you can change them. You can decide to speak differently. And in doing so, think differently, act differently, live differently. So here's the truth you can't ignore. You are either speaking life into your future or death into your potential. Every time you open your mouth, you're either reinforcing the old you or creating the new you. That's why growing in silence isn't just about avoiding noise. It's about being deliberate. And when you do speak, you speak like it matters, because it does. Your words are not background noise. They are the code your brain runs on. So program wisely. Choose words that align with who you're becoming, not who you used to be. Say things that move you forward. Cut out the complaining, the excuses, the self-deprecation. Speak like someone who believes they're capable, even if you don't fully feel it yet. Because when your words change, everything else follows. Think about the last time you got triggered. Maybe someone cut you off in traffic. Maybe your partner said something that rubbed you the wrong way. Maybe you were just tired, stressed, and someone's offhand comment sent you over the edge. Whatever it was, you felt it. Your chest got tight, your face got hot, your heart started to race, and before you could even process what was happening, you said something you immediately regretted. We've all been there. Most people think emotional control is about not feeling anything. That's not true. Emotional control is not about denying your emotions. It's about directing them. It's about choosing your response, not reacting out of impulse. And the fastest way to measure someone's emotional maturity? Look at what they say when they're under pressure. Look at how they speak when they're angry, disappointed, embarrassed, or frustrated. That's the truth. The ability to control what you say, especially in emotionally charged moments, is one of the most powerful skills you can develop. It separates people who lead from those who follow. It separates people who grow from those who stay stuck. And it separates people who build strong relationships from those who burn bridges. Most people operate like emotional time bombs. They go off without warning. They say things they don't mean because they've never practiced the pause. They've never trained themselves to hold back for just a few seconds and let the storm pass before responding. But here's the thing. There's a space between stimulus and response. That space, in that tiny moment, sometimes just one breath long, you get to choose. You get to decide, do I lash out? Do I shut down? Do I speak truth? Or do I throw fuel on the fire? You may not control what triggers you, but you do control what you say next. And what you say can change everything. When you train yourself to pause before speaking, especially when you're emotional, you build something most people never will. inner stability. You stop giving your power away to everyone who annoys you. You stop becoming a puppet to your emotions. And instead, you step into leadership, not over others, but over yourself. And let's be honest, we don't mess up our lives with big disasters most of the time. We mess them up one careless word at a time. We say something mean when we're angry. We break someone's trust when we're insecure. We overpromise because we feel pressured. We criticize when we feel threatened. Words carry weight, and once they leave your mouth, you can't pull them back in. That's why learning to control your speech isn't just about sounding wise. It's about living with fewer regrets. People will forget a lot about you, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And often, the thing that makes someone feel small, dismissed, or disrespected is just a few reckless words. But the opposite is also true. A calm, grounded response can disarm tension. A thoughtful silence can speak volumes. And a kind word, spoken even when you're upset, can heal more than you know. One of the most underrated forms of strength is simply keeping your mouth shut when everything in you wants to speak. Not because you're suppressing your truth, but because you're choosing your moment. You're protecting your peace. You're refusing to let someone else's chaos create chaos in you. And you know what happens when you live this way? People start to trust you more. They know you're not going to explode at every disagreement. They know you can handle conflict without making it personal. They feel safer around you because you're not unpredictable. You become the calm in the room, not the storm. And that presence, that calm, steady energy is what makes people gravitate toward you. That's what makes you influential. This isn't something that just happens overnight. It takes practice. It takes failing a few times. It takes catching yourself after you've said something impulsive and thinking, next time I'm going to do that differently. But the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. You build that muscle, that emotional pause, and it starts to change how you see yourself. You stop being reactive and start becoming intentional. You start to trust yourself more because you know you're not going to say something that makes you feel ashamed 5 minutes later. And you start to realize that silence in certain moments is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's easy to be loud. It's easy to let your emotions drive your mouth. What's hard, what's rare, is learning to sit in discomfort without reacting, to breathe through tension, to respond instead of react. That's what gives you the edge. So if you're serious about growth, if you want real power, not just surface level influence, start with this. Master your words. Pause before you speak. Get curious about your emotions instead of becoming controlled by them. And remember, the most powerful person in the room is not the one who talks the most. It's the one who knows exactly when to speak and exactly when to stay silent. That person, that can be you, but it starts with one choice. Control your voice and you take back your power every time. Most people talk too much and say too little. That's a truth a lot of us don't want to face. We think if we keep talking, keep posting, keep sharing, keep explaining ourselves, then people will understand us, value us, support us. But here's the problem. When you're constantly talking, you're not giving yourself or others time to think. You're not creating space for clarity. You're just adding to the noise. And eventually people stop listening. It's even worse, you stop listening to yourself. Think about the conversations you have in a day. How many of them are truly intentional? How often do you speak because you have something valuable to add versus speaking just to fill the silence? Most people operate on autopilot. They blurt out their thoughts, react without reflection, and narrate their lives to anyone who will listen. But here's what happens. The more you speak without purpose, the less impact your words carry. It's not that talking is bad, communication is essential, but compulsive talking, that need to constantly explain, defend, prove, comes from a place of insecurity. When you're grounded in who you are and what you're doing, you don't need to narrate it to the world. You just do it. You just live it. You don't need to say, I'm working on myself. People can see it. You don't need to tell everyone your next big move. You're already building it. There's a kind of power that shows up when you start being more selective with your words. You become intentional. You start noticing the weight of your voice. You choose when to speak and what to say. And when you do speak, people listen because your words are no longer diluted by constant chatter. They're focused, they carry meaning. And here's the kicker. When you speak less, you start to listen more. You begin to hear the subtleties in conversation. You start to pick up on things people usually miss. You get better at reading situations, understanding emotions, and responding rather than reacting. You become a better communicator because you've chosen silence as a strength, not a weakness. There's also a kind of self-respect that grows in silence. When you stop oversharing, you protect your energy. You protect your vision. Every time you spill your goals to someone who doesn't value them, you leak momentum. Every time you explain yourself to someone who isn't trying to understand you, you waste time and emotional energy. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. Not everyone needs to know what you're planning. Silence is how you hold power. Think about the people you truly admire, the ones who have presence, the ones who move with intention. They're not running their mouths all day. They're calculated. They're composed. They speak when it matters. And that's why when they do speak, people stop and pay attention. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to speak to be seen. The most powerful presence in a room is often the quietest one. The person who observes before they speak, who listens more than they talk, who chooses their words like they mean something. Because they do. When you understand that, your relationship with your own voice changes. You stop performing, you stop trying to impress, you stop seeking validation through your speech. Instead, you begin to ask, does this need to be said? Is this helpful? Am I speaking from confidence or from fear? And those questions start to shift the way you show up in conversations, in relationships, in your goals. The truth is, most people overcommunicate because they're uncomfortable with silence. But silence isn't awkward. It's powerful. It gives you room to think, room to breathe, room to grow. It separates you from the chaos. When everyone else is talking, silence sets you apart. It signals control. It shows you're not driven by the need to be heard. You're driven by the need to be effective. It takes discipline to hold back your words, especially when you're emotional, especially when you're excited. But that discipline is what creates real impact. Talking too much drains your credibility. People stop taking you seriously. But when you learn to speak only when it adds value, you become someone people listen to, not because you're loud, but because you're worth hearing. So the challenge is this: pause, reflect, choose. Don't say everything that comes to mind. Don't tell everyone your next move. Don't defend yourself when you don't need to. Let your actions become the loudest thing about you. Let your silence carry the confidence you've built in private. The more you hold back, the more powerful your presence becomes. It's not about being mysterious. It's about being grounded. It's about knowing that your worth isn't determined by how much you talk. It's shown through how much you grow. And growth doesn't need an audience. Growth needs focus, and focus loves silence. Let me tell you something that most people completely miss. You don't need to talk about what you're going to do. You just need to do it. In fact, the more time you spend talking, explaining, convincing others of your plans, the less energy and focus you have to actually bring them to life. It's a hard truth, but one that separates the dreamers from the doers. We live in a world where everyone's trying to be seen. Social media has turned people into broadcasters of their potential. You scroll and see everyone posting their big ideas, future goals, the hustle, the grind, the coming soon. But here's the secret. Real movers, real builders, real achievers, they don't have time to talk about what they're doing every 5 minutes. Why? Because they're busy doing it. Let your actions speak. It's not a quote on a Pinterest board. It's a lifestyle. When you show up consistently, when you put in the work day after day, that's when people start paying attention, not when you announce it. Not when you try to convince the world how serious you are. You show people your values, your commitment, your priorities, not by saying it, but by living it. The problem is that a lot of us get addicted to the announcement. It gives you a dopamine hit. You say you're going to start that business or go to the gym or write the book, and people cheer. It feels like progress, but it's not. That applause you're chasing, that validation, it fades fast. Because people aren't watching to see what you say. They're watching to see if you follow through. And let's be real. How many times have you told someone your plans and then felt less motivated to actually do it? That's because talking tricks your brain into thinking you've already achieved something. It satisfies your ego, but it doesn't build your discipline. Silence, on the other hand, keeps you hungry. When you don't broadcast your every move, you're left with one option: execution. Here's the thing, results are undeniable. You don't have to explain results. You don't have to justify effort when the outcomes speak for themselves. The people who make a real impact, who lead, who create, who build something that lasts, they're not in the comments section defending themselves. They're in the lab. They're on the track. They're in the arena, doing the work when no one's watching. And this doesn't just apply to your career. It applies to your relationships, your health, your mindset. If you're constantly telling people you're working on yourself, but your behavior doesn't match, it's noise. If you say you're focused on healing or growing, but your habits still reflect chaos, it's performative. People believe patterns, not promises. They watch how you move. What you say is background noise. What you do is the main event. I get it. Silence is uncomfortable. It feels lonely. You want someone to witness your effort, to validate your pain, your growth. But silence builds strength. It teaches you to become your own cheerleader, your own accountability partner, your own standard setter. Because the truth is, if you need the world to cheer for you before you start, you'll fold the second they stop clapping. Some of the most powerful transformations you'll ever go through will happen in complete silence. No announcements, no updates, just you, the work, and the results. And when the results show up, people will notice. You won't have to say a word. You'll walk into a room and your energy will tell the story. Your presence will carry weight, not because you talked about change, but because you became it. When you let your actions speak, you build credibility, you build trust with others, but more importantly, with yourself. You stop being someone who just talks a big game and start being someone who lives one. And that's the kind of person who creates real momentum in life. So stop trying to prove yourself with words. Stop needing people to understand your path before it's finished. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your silence. You don't need approval to go build something meaningful. You just need the courage to stay consistent, to keep showing up, and to let the work do the talking. It's not glamorous. It's not loud. It's not attention seeking, but it's effective and it's powerful. When you truly grasp the discipline of letting your actions speak, you free yourself from the pressure to perform for others. You reclaim your energy, your focus, and your drive. Silence isn't a lack of communication. It's a deep commitment to truth, a commitment to yourself, to the version of you that's evolving behind the scenes. Because when that version finally steps out, fully formed, unshakable, undeniable, no speech will be necessary. You won't have to say anything. Everyone will see it. When you stop explaining yourself to everyone, you start focusing on yourself, and that's where real growth begins. You don't owe the world a detailed update on your every move. You don't need to justify your goals, your silence, or your strategy to anyone. The moment you give yourself permission to move in silence, you create space to think clearly, to align with your purpose, and to build something meaningful without the noise of outside opinions. We're conditioned to believe that progress must be public, that if people don't see it, it doesn't count, that if you're not constantly talking about what you're doing, then you're not really doing anything. But that's a lie. Some of the most powerful growth you'll ever experience will happen behind closed doors, in quiet moments, in solitude, in times when nobody is clapping for you, and that's okay. That's more than okay. It's necessary. When you grow in silence, you remove the pressure to perform. You stop living for other people's reactions and start living for your own results. You give yourself the time and energy to actually build the habits, the routines, and the mindset that lead to transformation. You stop explaining your moves to people who don't understand your vision, and honestly, they're not supposed to. It's your vision for a reason. People will question your silence. They'll wonder why you're not showing up the way you used to, why you're not posting, not texting back right away, not going out as much. And here's the truth. You don't need to explain. You're not disappearing. You're evolving. You're not pulling away. You're tuning in to something deeper, something that can't be found in the noise of validation, but only in the quiet of self-awareness. Silence is not just about being quiet. It's about being intentional. It's about learning to protect your energy from distractions, from critics, from people who pretend to support you but are secretly hoping you fail. When you stop talking so much about what you're going to do and you just do it, you take the pressure off. You keep your energy focused where it needs to be, on execution. There's a discipline to silence, a maturity in not needing immediate recognition. Growth isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it looks like waking up early when no one's watching. Sometimes it's cutting ties with people who drain you without making a big announcement. Sometimes it's turning down invitations so you can get 1% better today than you were yesterday. That's what silent growth looks like. Not loud, but it's real. Think about a seed. It grows underground in the dark before anyone sees a thing. No one praises it. No one claps for it, but it's working. It's pushing. It's developing strength so that when it finally breaks through the surface, it's ready to thrive. You are that seed. And your silence right now, it's sacred. It's not a sign that you're lost. It's a sign that you're getting ready to rise. You also begin to realize how much energy you were wasting trying to explain yourself. Every time you share your vision with someone who doesn't get it, you dilute it. Every time you ask for validation from people who haven't walked your path, you weaken your focus. Not everyone is supposed to understand your next chapter, especially if they weren't part of the one you just closed. Some people will misunderstand your silence, let them. Some will feel uncomfortable with your boundaries, let them. Because this season of your life is not about pleasing others. It's about becoming the version of you that doesn't need their approval anymore. Growth in silence is also about learning how to be your own biggest cheerleader. When the applause stops, when no one is watching, can you still show up? Can you still believe in your mission, even when it feels like you're doing it alone? That's what separates people who talk about change from people who actually create it. The ones who grow in silence don't need hype, they need habits. They don't need external validation, they need internal clarity. You'll notice something powerful happen when you choose this path. You'll start to move differently. You'll walk into rooms with confidence, not because people gassed you up, but because you know what you've been building behind the scenes. You'll have conversations and smile to yourself because you know what's coming, even if they don't. There's peace in knowing that you're working on something meaningful, even if nobody else sees it yet. And when the results come, when the progress is visible, when the breakthrough finally shows up, it will speak for itself. You won't need to explain a thing. Your life will show what your mouth never had to say. That's the power of growing in silence. That's the power of trusting the process more than the praise. That's the kind of growth that lasts. Most people underestimate the power of listening. We live in a world that celebrates talking. We admire great speakers, praise bold opinions, and reward those who dominate conversations. But very few people recognize that the real strength lies in being the one who listens. Not just hearing the words people say, but truly listening, to understand, to learn, and to grow. When you choose to speak less and listen more, something powerful begins to shift inside you. You begin to realize that every conversation is not a stage for your opinion. Every moment of silence is not something that needs to be filled. The need to always have something to say is often rooted in insecurity, the fear of not being seen or heard. But once you start practicing intentional listening, that fear starts to fade. You no longer need to fill the space with words just to feel significant. You become more grounded, more focused, and more aware of your environment. Listening teaches you things that speaking never could. You learn how people think, what they value, where they hurt, and what they're trying to hide. It gives you access to information that people don't even realize they're sharing. People love to talk about themselves, not because they're selfish, but because they want to feel understood. And when you become the person who gives them that space, they trust you. They respect you, they remember you, not because you had the most to say, but because you gave them the rare gift of being heard. There's a misconception that being quiet in conversations makes you weak or passive. That's not true. Silence, when used with intention, makes you strategic. It makes you thoughtful. It shows that you value clarity over noise, that you choose reflection over reaction. The smartest people in the room aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who observe, process, and then speak with impact. Think about this. How often do you listen to respond instead of listening to understand? Most people are so focused on what they're going to say next that they miss what's actually being said. That's not communication. That's performance. True communication begins when you stop performing and start connecting. And you can't connect if you're constantly waiting for your turn to talk. When you start listening deeply, you also start developing emotional intelligence. You pick up on tone, energy, body language, and hidden meanings. You start to see what's underneath the surface, and that gives you an edge in relationships, in business, and life. Because while others are reacting, you're responding with clarity. While others are rushing to speak, you're gathering insight. While others are trying to be impressive, you're becoming impactful. Listening is also how you learn. Every person you meet knows something you don't. Every conversation holds the potential to teach you something about them, about the world, about yourself. But you'll miss those lessons if you're always trying to prove you already know everything. Humility is found in silence. Growth is found in listening. When you embrace that, you evolve at a much faster rate than someone who's constantly talking but never absorbing. Speaking less also gives weight to your words. When you do choose to speak, people pay attention. They know you're not just talking to fill the space, you're speaking with intention. Your voice carries more power because it's not overused. It's respected. It's measured. People begin to see you as someone who brings value, not just volume. And here's something else. Listening doesn't just apply to people. It applies to life, to nature, to your own thoughts. When you slow down and stop talking, you start to hear the world around you. You notice patterns. You gain clarity. You start to recognize the noise inside your own head, the fear, the anxiety, the overthinking. And you learn to quiet it down. Silence becomes a tool for self-awareness, and self-awareness is the foundation for growth. In difficult situations, the ability to listen can save you from unnecessary conflict. You don't need to react to every criticism. You don't need to defend every action. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response, just listening, letting the other person talk, letting the moment pass. Because not everything deserves your energy. Not every battle is worth fighting. And not every opinion is worth responding to. This practice of speaking less and listening more isn't easy. It requires patience, requires humility, it requires self-restraint, but if you can train yourself to do it, you become more composed, more aware, more respected. You become the kind of person who others seek out for guidance. Not because you talk a lot, but because when you do speak, it matters. So challenge yourself. The next time you're in a conversation, resist the urge to dominate it. Be fully present. Listen with curiosity, not judgment. Don't rush to offer advice or interrupt with your story. Just listen and watch how your relationships shift. Watch how your mind sharpens. Watch how your influence grows. Because when you speak less and listen more, you don't lose power, you gain it. Silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's the presence of control, of awareness, of mental clarity. When you stop filling every gap with words, when you stop feeling the need to respond to every trigger or validate every emotion out loud, something remarkable happens. You begin to hear yourself, not the reactive self, not the stressed, overthinking, people-pleasing version of you, but the grounded, focused, resilient version, the one that knows what matters and what. We live in a world where everyone's in a rush to be heard. Everyone's trying to shout over each other, constantly sharing their thoughts, opinions, problems, and updates. And in the middle of all that noise, we lose the one voice that actually matters, our own inner guidance. You see, clarity doesn't show up in the chaos. It doesn't thrive in distraction. It grows in the quiet. When you choose silence, when you intentionally step away from the noise and the need to always say something, you give your mind the space to breathe. Think about how many times you've made a decision you later regretted because you didn't take a moment to pause. How many arguments could have been avoided if you had chosen silence over the need to win? How many relationships would have been stronger if you had listened instead of reacting? That's what mental clarity is all about, having the awareness to pause, to reflect, and to choose your response instead of being owned by your emotion. Silence helps you recognize your triggers. It teaches you to slow down when your instincts tell you to speed up. It gives you the space between stimulus and response, a space that when used correctly gives you power. The power to think before you speak, the power to understand before you assume, the power to choose calm over chaos. This kind of control builds resilience because when you master your words, you begin to master your mindset. You're no longer a prisoner of the situation or the people around you. You stop giving away your energy to meaningless arguments, petty distractions, or emotional reactions that drain your strength. You become someone who doesn't need to prove themselves constantly. Someone who doesn't need external validation to feel secure. Someone who can walk away from noise, not because you're weak, but because you're focused. This is the kind of power that doesn't scream. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It moves quietly but confidently, and that confidence is built in silence. It's in the moments when no one's watching, when no one's praising you, when no one's clapping for you. That's when you grow. That's when you get clear on who you are and what you're working toward. And that kind of growth is priceless. There's a reason the most successful people aren't the loudest. They're the ones who know how to protect their energy. They know how to stay centered in the storm. And they do it by practicing restraint, by not letting their mouth lead when their mind hasn't caught up, by not speaking just to fill space. Every word you speak either serves your growth or takes from it. And the truth is, most people are leaking power through their words every day. talking when they should be listening, reacting when they should be observing, explaining themselves to people who don't even care. That's energy wasted. That's clarity lost. If you want to build real mental strength, you have to learn to sit in silence, to be still in discomfort, to not rush to fix, justify, or respond, to simply observe what's happening inside you. Because when you do that, when you stop trying to control everything with your words, you start to gain control within. You begin to trust your inner compass. You stop asking for direction from the outside world because now you've found it in yourself. And here's the truth. Silence won't always be comfortable. In fact, at first it might feel unnatural, especially if you're used to always explaining yourself or talking your way through every situation. But over time, you'll begin to see it as your superpower. You'll notice how much more you understand when you listen, how much calmer you stay when you don't react, how much stronger you feel when you don't give your power away with words that don't serve you. Silence is clarity. Silence is discipline. Silence is strength. You don't need to comment on everything. You don't need to defend yourself to everyone. You don't need to narrate your journey to people who don't even walk beside you. Keep your focus, keep your vision, and keep your voice for moments that matter. Let silence sharpen your mind. Let it toughen your resilience. Let it guide you to become the person who speaks only when it's meaningful and who knows that real power doesn't have to be loud to be heard.